Shallows and Miseries. Who and what? After the winter solstice, the Yotun send a host of warriors into Karaman. They came not from the west, as they usually do, but from the north, out of Liathavan and into Braden's Yasa. The garrison at Fort Braden fought courageously, but they could not hold the Orcs, even with the aid of the Red Wind Corsairs, the Black Thorns, and the Quiet Steppe. The Yotun captured the fort and conquered the hills of the Yasa, and made serious inroads into the Jade Range plains. Immediately after the spring equinox, the Corsairs and the Steppe make preparations to withdraw from Karaman, journeying north toward Upwold. The Blackthorns remain, and are joined by 5 new armies fresh from the liberation of Bregersland: Isella's Dance, the Fire of the South, and the newly kindled Burning Falcon, the Fist of the Mountains, and the Drakes. All 6 armies are supported by Imperial magic. The Drakes and both the Navarre armies fight with confident strategy, while the Fist of the Mountains bears an enchantment that allows the large numbers of independent captains to quickly adapt to the heat and dust of the Cinnabar Hills, and to the mystical traditions of the Wintermark army. At first it appears the Fire of the South have taken on the aspect of the Navarre. The freeborn soldiers are merciless in battle, taking every opportunity to cut down and kill their Jotun adversaries. Implacable and merciless, they target baggage trains, execute the fallen, and cut down anyone attempting to flee without hesitation. Cold and calculating to the point of callousness, there is none of the easy camaraderie or joy in battle that often accompanies a freeborn force. At night, the campfires created by the Fire of the South burn green and blue and provide little heat. Several soldiers in the other armies look askance at this behaviour, but it soon becomes clear that the Fire of the South are under a powerful winter enchantment, one not familiar to Imperial magicians, that makes them adept at slaughtering their enemies. It just has some side effects some Imperials might find unpalatable. The contrast with the normal behaviour of soldiers from the Brass Coast and with the other freeborn army could not be more marked. The newest Imperial army and its staunch core of Kohan warriors is accompanied by a host of crimson and gold soldiers from the fields of glory. They fight under the banner of the Queen of the Pennants, and it is surely no happenstance that the majority of them bear the mien of the eagle: feathered brows, keen eyes, sharp beaks and talons. Scattered among their number are a handful of magical beastmasters who fight not only with golden spears, but with trained ruby-feathered hunting hawks that strike from the open sky with pinpoint accuracy, blinding their targets before they even know they're under attack. By themselves, these magical allies would be notable enough, but the Burning Falcon are also accompanied by magical allies who are not beholden to the Lady of the Red and the Gold. At first, it's hard to tell them apart from the Knights of the Summer Realm, but it is soon obvious that they owe allegiance to someone else. A score of warriors with midnight blue skin, raging crimson eyes and hair battle alongside the Kohan wherever the fighting is thickest. Clad in flowing scarlet robes, bound in red iron scale, and as often as not fighting with paired swords, they are emissaries of the eternal Yannon, here at the invitation of the general. Across the Jade Range. Almost immediately, it is obvious that the Empire's armies are not here to defend Karaman, but to drive the Jotun out and reclaim the land they have conquered. The Burning Falcon charge triumphantly into the Jade Range, ably supported by the Fist of the Mountains, seeking opportunities for heroism. The latter army favours tactics that focus on meeting the Jotun in heroic combat and avoiding needless deaths, as they have done in every engagement against the Jotun since the National Assembly of Wintermark chose to eschew slaughter in favour of glorious battle against the Western Orcs. These armies do the bulk of the fighting to reclaim Jade Range, and while neither the Orcs nor their human opponents offer much quarter to their enemies, neither do they seek opportunities for bloodshed. This is a war of conquest, not slaughter. They are also backed by the Fire of the South, and they do seek to slaughter the Jotun wherever possible, overwhelming their defences and putting anyone they can catch to the sword. No parley is accepted, no retreat allowed. The Orcs seem almost taken aback by this shift in strategy from the Freeborn. It must be obvious to them that something has changed. They expect the Navarre to use whatever means are necessary to end their lives, and while the Blackthorns are more focused on claiming the Jade Range, Isella's Dance more than makes up for them in terms of bloodlust. Using their mastery of spring magic and the apothecary arts, the Thorns of Isalia's Dance kill their foes quickly and efficiently. Everywhere as sailors dance and the Blackthorns go, they are pursued and harried by the heralds of Hyak that were unleashed by Alec Surefoot last season. The Navarre armies are not alone. The Fist make a valiant effort in trying to support their allies, especially being supported by so many Thorns, Vates and Guides, but the creatures aligned with the Knight of the Hawks still manage to bring their prey down. Finally, there are the Drakes, who form a steady foundation to the Imperial strategy, balancing their desire to engage the Yatun with the need to ensure that none are left behind to strike against poorly protected flanks or rear. Many of the soldiers clearly wish they were in the north, finishing the conquest of Bregisland, but they also understand the importance of helping their allies and securing their own borders. You can throw a stone from the top of Fort Braden and hit Sarkham Town Hall, as one marcher puts it, somewhat prophetically as it turns out. Against them are bands of Yatun defenders, but the Jotun strategy has changed. They are no longer pushing to conquer Karaman, instead they are barely fighting to hold what they have already taken. Wherever possible, and where the merciless bloodthirst of the Fire of the South allows, they retreat back towards the Yasser Hills. None of the familiar banners of the Jotun heroes are spotted. Indeed, there are few enough standards of the Jotun armies on display. A ripple of unease goes through the Imperial armies, especially those enchanted with an appreciation of wider strategy. Something is amiss. Could this be related to events at Braden's Yasser during the spring equinox? Meanwhile, in Tasato. At the same time the Imperial armies are liberating Jade Range, a large force of Jotun raiders strikes east from Braden's Yasser into Tasato. They move under the walrus banner of the Draugr hero Asa Winterborn, the Yagara champion, far from their northern home. Asa is one of those who helped bring down the western end of Pakanan's Pass last year, and her successes in Semasuak have seen her warband grow mighty indeed. Their target is not Tasato itself. The Walrus banner is mighty, but not mighty enough to threaten an entire city. Divided as it so often is, striking against one side or the other would immediately unite the entire populace against the outsider, at least for as long as the threat remained. Instead, they launch a lightning raid into Cascatus, targeting the rich town of Chevia and the marvellous locks of the Sapphire Stair. There is only a small garrison at Chevia, and even with the support of local militia and guards employed by the merchants, the town is quickly overwhelmed. Most of the raiders set to work stripping the town of easily portable valuables and offering the choice to anyone unable to flee. Perhaps 150 Imperial citizens are taken as thralls. They are primarily from the League, but some traders from other nations are also captured. While this is going on, Asa Winterborn herself turns her attention to the Sapphire Stair. The masterwork locks are almost as old as the Empire itself, having been constructed under the auspices of the Tasatan engineer Marco di Paraiso for Emperor Giovanni himself. They have stood for nearly 4 centuries, but Isa undoes the work of the League engineers in less than a day. At her command, Jotun siege engineers turn loose their wrath against the lock gates. With block and chain, with fire, with picks and axes, and with brute force, the balance of the locks is undone. The water starts to flow freely, aiding the Jotun's ruinous design. They continue their wreckers' work through the night, lit by great bonfires made of wood torn from the town of Chevia itself. These fires that serve as beacons for the defenders of Tasato, for the soldiers from La Redotta Rezia in the city itself. Unfortunately, they arrive just a few hours too late. Asa and her warriors are already retreating west, and even as the first League soldiers reach Chevia, the last gates of the Sapphire Stair are overwhelmed, and a wave of unleashed river water cascades down the Vassa towards the sea. The final insult, on top of the destruction of the locks, on top of the theft, on top of the kidnap of Imperial citizens into slavery, is that while the Yatun did their work, some of their number went up to the Red Rock. The wall of red stone is visible to all in the town, and all travelling along the Vassa near Tasato. Previously, it held a mural commissioned by the Gilded Horncarter, celebrating what it meant to be a Tasatan. Now it has been completely defaced. The rock is gouged and daubed with white and red paint, and in place of the inspirational art, there is a crude depiction of a walrus and the rune of victory. Meanwhile in Mornwald. While Asa Winterborn raids east, her bosom ally and bitter rival Yanya Arandin strikes north into the Mornwald. Under the banner of the Howling Bear, a force of over 1,000 Yotuns spill across the peaceful grasslands of the Greensward. They seem to be intent on two things: raiding the wealth of the Morn and carrying away its people as thralls. The main group strides northward, clearly intent on attacking the Singing Caves. Most avoid the ruins of Overton, but by all accounts a small group of warriors and Godi travelling with the warband split off here to visit the burial mound and apple trees near the site of the climactic battle that took place at Overton during the liberation of the Mornwald. The rest travel with such speed that the warning of their presence has barely reached Sarkham before they hit the Singing Caves. Shortly before dusk they attack, and if they imagined it would be an easy matter to claim the mines, they have failed to take into account the bone-deep stubbornness of the marches. To their credit, the miners refuse to cede the mines to the Orc attackers, fighting bitterly to hold the Orcs at bay. They are joined by labourers, busy building Lothar's Lift, the mine elevator recently commissioned by the Senate to allow deeper veins of mithril ore to be reached. The fight is desperate and vicious. The Yotun have the weight of numbers, but the miners and labourers are able to use the confined tunnels and narrow galleries of the mine to their advantage. The Druj might simply have collapsed the mine workings or flooded the place. The Yotun are more interested in claiming the mithril than committing an atrocity. As the first soldiers from the garrison at Farstrider's Watch arrive, the Yotun under the Howling Bear banner turn their full attention to the soldiers, revelling in the chance for an open fight rather than a battle in the rat runs of the mine. They don't hold long. Now that the marchers know the danger, more and more soldiers arrive to protect the Singing Caves. The Jotun quickly retreat, only partially successful in their goals. While they are only able to claim a portion of the mithril that has already been mined, the ingots and ore waiting to be transported east towards Tasato, they do not penetrate far into the mine itself. They're also unable to claim any thralls. Everyone they might have wished to take retreated into the mine at the first sight of their approach. Unfortunately, they are able to steal the weirwood that had been brought here to build Lothar's Lift. Only a portion was already in place, but what was there they were able to steal. While the bulk of Yanya's Arandin forces attempts to capture the Singing Caves, the rest range across the Greenswood and into Southmoor, attacking farms, villages and caravans wherever they can. They seem to know the area well. Indeed, there are indications that some of them have been equipped with crudely drawn maps, possibly provided by the traitor Little Robbie Erskine. They don't attack the market town itself, and as news of their attack spreads, human marchers and former orc thralls alike seek the safety of its walls. Not everyone is fortunate enough to live within reach of Sarkham, however. Yet even so, the Yotun don't have things entirely their own way. The stewards of the larger farms welcome those who seek shelter from them. Knots of yeoman soldiers form across the southern Mornwald, prepared to sell their lives to protect their kin and their neighbours. This includes the Mornwald orcs as well. The magician Castor the Black in particular welcomes human and orc alike to the relative safety of the Black Hill mine. The vast majority of the orcs won't fight themselves, of course. They still adhere to their peculiar pacifist philosophy. But there are stories in the wake of the Yotun attack of a few younger orcs fighting alongside the human defenders. The Jotun raiders, for their part, seem very surprised indeed by the fact that not only do their former thralls not welcome their return, they actively support the marchers fighting against them, in the same way they once supported their Jotun rulers, with herbs and with magic. As the defenders of the Mornwald gather, the garrisons at Farstrider's Watch and Bulwark, the forces of the Bailiff of the Downs and the yeomanry itself, the Jotun pull back westwards. Within a week or so of their first attack, the majority of Yanya Urandin's raiders have retreated back into the forests of Liathavan, taking with them a fair amount of marcher wealth, but only a few score marcher thralls. Not that that is much consolation to those who have been carried away to thraldom, or to the families they have left behind. Meanwhile, in Madruga, a third Jotun warband strikes south from Braden's Yassa into Madruga. This band of Yagara raids under the burning oak banner of Stephen of Sarkham, the hated traitor to the marchers. Over 1,000 strong, it's perhaps surprising that the man born in the Mornwald isn't overseeing the attack against his former home. Or perhaps not. Perhaps even the Jotun realised that it might be a mistake to send Stephen into the Mornwald and expect him to keep his head. As it is, the primarily human force wastes comparatively little time against raiding after they enter the rugged Taurus plains. They move quickly and with purpose, arrows straight towards the Vassa, and the great bridge that crosses its tumultuous flow. There are a few orcs fighting alongside them, but reports suggest as many as a dozen much larger shapes, ice giants loyal to the Queen of Ice and Darkness. They reach the Spider's Dream at around the same time that news of their raid reaches the Salt Guard in southern Sirach and Our Lady of Pride in Savos. A few raiders press across to attack Trevento on the other side of the Vassa, while others capture Freeborn and League caravans looking to cross the bridge. Fortunately, the limited garrison there is able to turn the raiders back, but not before they have inflicted some damage, raided a number of businesses, and taken a score or more of League citizens as thralls, dragging them back across the bridge into Madruga. Savos is not their ambition, however. Rather, it is the bridge itself. The attack on Trevento turns out to have been a feint as much as anything else, tricking the League defenders into imagining a much larger force is imminently due. This gives Stephen much needed time to secure the bridge. Well aware that it is only a matter of time before Imperial garrisons rally to stop him, Stephen sets loose the ice giants, while his own Yagara attack the surprisingly robust cables that support the spiderweb-like structure. This is the second time in recent memory that barbarian forces have attacked the bridge. The Grendel tried to destroy it 5 years ago, but were prevented by Imperial heroes. This time, though, the Mormor's betrayer's plan is both less ambitious and more successful. Rather than collapse the entire bridge, Stephen seems to want to ruin only a part of it, the cables and supports that hold up the western half. The former Mormor Yagara have demonstrated their cleverness when it comes to ruining the roads and bridges of the Empire in the past. Stephen was behind the devastating attacks in Karaman that saw the 3 northern regions of the Cinnabar Hills isolated from one another. It takes him a little over a day to send the middle west span of the Spider's Dream plunging into the Vassa and weaken the supports holding the remaining sections on the Madrugan shore. If he had more time, or a larger force, he could perhaps do much more damage, but as soon as the first cables snap and the bridge starts to break, his banner bearers sound the retreat. The raiders sniping at Trevento hair back across the bridge, with League soldiers in hot pursuit. Some are caught in the collapse. Most are able to see what is happening and get back across the bridge before the section falls. A small number of both soldiers and Yagara are unfortunate enough to be trapped on the wrong side, and both are made short work of by their enemies. The Spider's Dream teeters and groans for the next 3 days, and there is significant concern it will collapse entirely. Several more cables snap. A wave of water unleashed by the destruction of the Sapphire Stair threatens to wash away one of the supports, but the stout white granite pillars hold. By the time the Yagara of the Burning Oak have returned to Braden's Yassa, the bridge has settled down. The majority of the structure still holds, but the central section is gone, rendering it useless for traders or for armies seeking to enter the Brass Coast. Meanwhile, in Karaman, one final series of attacks takes place where the Empire and the Jotun clash in Karaman. The orcs under the mountain banner of the Karaman Peaks, who fight for the warlord Getaran, seem to have more in common with the Lasambrians than with their Jotun cousins from Narkist and Kelsey. They are quick-moving raiders, first and foremost. Last season they raided the mines of Sierra Briante and the caravans out of Sierra de Mata, but their main focus was on supporting their Jotun allies. Not so in the wake of the spring equinox. Getaran, it seems, is off the chain. The orcs under the mountain war banner are primarily made up of former brigands and bandits who haunted the high peaks above Karaman before being recruited by the Jotun. They know the northern hills well, and they know how to move across them safely even with the damage caused by Stephen of Sarkham. They also know where many of the richest targets are to be found. Fortunately, for the freeborn of the Cinnabar Hills, steps have been taken to counter such underhand tactics. The magicians of the Del Toro family have woven a complex shawl of autumn magic and laid it over the territory. This is not the first time the hand of the Demiro or an effect like it has been brought to bear in the Brass Coast. Its magic is subtle, shifting probability and coincidence in pursuit of protecting the wealth and fortune of a territory's citizens from thieves. Those who try to flee from or travel across Karaman find their paths eased, while those who try to steal or rob from others find all kinds of little annoyances placed in their way. The main thrust of the magic is to defend against a plundering army, but it is still able to stymie most of the efforts of Gert Aaron and his warriors. Unfortunately, the subtle magic is not enough to stop the mountain banner attacking the caravans transporting mithril and white granite from the great mine of Briante and the Dalmatian cliffs. As the orcs move west, they attack first one and then the other, seizing the valuable Bourse materials. Obviously the freeborn do not give up their valuables without a fight, but they can't hold back the orcs by themselves. Work is well underway rebuilding the roads and providing the essential defences that will protect caravans in Karaman in the future, but in the short term the Orcs are able to attack Western Karaman with relative impunity. They are only interested in the immediate benefits themselves, however. Unlike the other raiders, they seem disinterested in claiming thralls. They don't offer the choice, preferring to simply ignore anyone who doesn't actively stand against them. They strike, seize what they can, and continue westward. As the battle for Fort Braden begins, the Orcs of the Mountain Banner leave Karaman for Liathavin, passing through Redgate Pass. The Flames of Fort Braden. With raiders striking out in all four cardinal directions, the Imperial armies push into Braden's Yasser. There they discover the truth. The Jotun have almost entirely abandoned Karaman. The great armies that swept out of Liaven's Glen have retreated the way they came, in good order. Perhaps this was always their intention. Perhaps it is news of the invasion far to the north that has caused them to abandon their ambitions in the Cinnabar Hills. Either way, the majority of the Orc forces have already left the territory. Those who remain are camped around Fort Braden, and it becomes clear they do not intend to surrender without a fight. They fight under empty red banners, no designs on them, and they neither offer nor ask for quarter. There is absolutely no chance that they can win, but they don't seem to care. They seem intent on forcing the Empire to buy every inch of the Yasser Hills with blood. Whether Orc or human, it matters not. Against the lone garrison of the formerly Imperial fortification, the Imperial armies strike like a thunderous hammer. There is no siege. The gates of the fortification have barely been repaired and fall almost immediately. The fighting inside the tower is twice as bloody as it was when the Yatun took the place less than 3 months ago. The bloodthirsty magic laid over the fire of the south means that even if their allies were minded to do so, they cannot be stopped from putting every Jotun defender to the sword. The triumphant and overwhelming assault of the fire, the fist and the falcon sees the walls teeter and break. The ramparts are shattered, the towers burn. Almost all the serious casualties suffered by the Empire are taken in the Battle of Fort Braden. The defenders are wiped out almost to the last Orc. It's here a portion of the truth becomes apparent. These Orcs, many of them grizzled veterans, are some of those who fought the Empire in the Mormwold, who survived the Battle of Orchard's Watch 4 years ago. This band have been hand-picked from amongst those who survived that terrible battle. Some wintermarkers recall the echo of the Jarl of Karheim's words, that the Jotun have been fundamentally shamed by their inability to protect the thralls from the magic of the twin curses that ravaged the Mormwold, and that war would never end until every one of those who failed in their sacred task was dead. It seems the garrison of Fort Braden knew that only death awaited them, and chose it on their own terms. The Glass Miracle. The tower itself has seen generations of Jotun and Lassambrian raids and attacks, often the only defender against the Orcs of the West. Now it teeters on the brink of destruction. In fact, it's not clear why it is still standing. Between the attack of the Jotun last season and the overwhelming assault of the Imperial forces, it should by rights have been reduced to rubble. Yet still it stands, battered but not ruined, damaged but still somehow miraculously unfallen. At first it seems apparent that there's a magical explanation for this wonder. The stones thrum with the echo of summer magic, while the wood and the tile burned and broke, the stones themselves cannot even be cracked. Perhaps predicting the potential outcome of the Imperial attack into Braden's Yasser, the Hakima of the Glass Mantle Coven have placed the stalwart stand on solid ground over Fort Braden. It's almost impossible for a fortification protected by this enchantment to fall. Only a force strong enough to completely break the defenders can completely destroy it. Unfortunately, that is exactly what has happened here. The force brought against the citadel is so overwhelming that it is way beyond the power of even the most powerful magic conceivable to preserve the stone edifice. And yet, somehow, the tower still stands. It is as if some kind of miracle has taken place. Astonishing as this wonder is, it will not last long. In part, Fort Braden is hanging on only by dint of the Hakima's magic, and that force is fading. Technically, it's not even a fortification anymore. When the last rays of sun touch it on the last day of the summer solstice, the last fragments of magic still infusing it will fade and the old castle will be no more. Even a miracle will not save it then. Yet it seems there may still be an opportunity to prevent that, if the Empire's heroes can move quickly enough. Perhaps Fort Braden might be saved after all. The dust settles. The raiders who have struck Karaman and its neighbours retreat back into Jotun lands. In some cases there are lingering warbands, but the majority have already crossed the borders into Leathavan. Karaman has been liberated, although not without cost. Perhaps as many as 1,000 Jotun died, mostly in the defence of Fort Braden, but no more than 200 Imperial soldiers have fallen. The castle itself teeters on the edge of oblivion. The damage it has suffered will claim the ultimate toll soon if the Empire cannot avert this fate. But the Empire is victorious. The Jotun are gone, Karaman is once again Imperial, the people are once again safe from barbarian orcs. For now, at least. Game information. The territory of Karaman is entirely Imperial again. Fort Braden is technically destroyed. It cannot be targeted by enchantments or other effects that work on fortifications, such as Hammers of the Brilliant Shore. However, by some miracle, the last fading echoes of the magic used to preserve it still remain, and there is an opportunity for Imperial heroes to prevent its fall, should the military council wish to take it. The Singing Caves, Great Mine of Briante, and Donation Cliffs have been raided, and precious Bourse materials stolen, but they themselves are undamaged. Unfortunately, a portion of the weirwood contributed to the construction of Lothar's Lift in Mormwald has also been stolen, delaying completion of the project. The weirwood will need to be replaced. The Sapphire Stair in Tasato has been all but destroyed. The Keeper of the Sapphire Stair no longer receives tolls from merchants using the locks. Indeed, any citizen from Tasato with a fleet will suffer a -1 penalty to production until the locks are replaced. Doing so is relatively straightforward. The project is a sinecure requiring 10 wains each of white granite, weirwood and mithril, and 60 crowns in labour, taking 3 months to complete. The damage to the red rock can be dealt with by the Keeper as part of their normal duties. Even though the stairs are gone, they do not automatically lose their title and would resume custodianship if the locks were replaced. The damage to the Spider's Dream is more significant, however. Until it is repaired, the Spider's Tollkeep receives no money from merchants passing between the Brass Coast and the League. More importantly, the damage presents significant difficulties to campaign armies trying to move between Madruga and either Tasato or Savos, or vice versa. Any army that does so will immediately stop in the other territory, even if they still have movement remaining. Repairing the Spider's Tollkeep is not as straightforward as restoring the Sapphire Stair. The Senate will need an appraisal to determine how best to replicate the genius of the Suspension Bridge's original architect without damaging its integrity. Participation. The Raids. Any character from Karaman, Madruga, Savos, Tasato or Mormwald, or who was visiting those territories may have been impacted by the raids. No personal resources are affected thanks to a combination of enchantments, local garrisons and the focused intent of the raiders. However, it is entirely possible that friends or family members might have been taken by those raids interested in capturing thralls. Essentially all those except the raid into Western Karaman. It's also appropriate for anyone from those territories, especially with a link to the areas attacked, to have been involved in trying to fight against the raids. The titles mentioned in particular might give some thought as to how they were involved in the fight. Any character from the 4 target territories, Savos, or who holds a title associated with one of the areas attacked, such as Bailiff of the Downs, Keeper of the Sapphire Stair, Spider's Tollkeep, or holder of one of the Bourse seats attacked, can email plot@profounddecisions.co.uk with your CID before the 19th of July to begin play with a lingering traumatic wound incurred while trying to defend against the raiders. Stories created should be in line with those mentioned in the text. With the armies. Any character whose military unit was assigned to fight alongside the Burning Falcon this downtime may choose to have been impacted by the experience of battling in close proximity to heralds of both Eleonaris and Yannon. If you possess hero points, you may choose to gain an additional temporary hero point which, once spent, is permanently gone. It will have faded entirely by the end of the summer solstice regardless. The cruel winter magic on the Fire of the South will have faded by the start of the summer solstice, but a faint echo might remain. Any character whose military unit supported the army may choose to be affected by a role-playing effect. They become cold and calculating to the point of callousness, and value only results as opposed to methods. This effect is particularly strong on any character of the Draugr lineage. Battle opportunities. Imperial prognosticators have identified a major conjunction of the Sentinel Gate during the coming solstice leading to Braden's Yassa that they believe will offer an opportunity to prevent the destruction of the fortress there. A full report will be presented close to the summer solstice. A second major conjunction has been located in the far west of Karaman, which may offer a chance to close the Red Gate, making it harder for Jotun forces to attack Sierra Briante and Sierra de Marta in future. Conjunctions. In addition to the major conjunctions, there are several opportunities during the coming solstice for Imperial heroes to engage with the Jotun. Leave-taking, conjunction. Isa Winterborn's warband has withdrawn from Tasato, but her champion remains. The Sentinel Gate will open at 8:30 on Friday to Duarte's Repose in Terrio, Tasato. The custodian of the Aretan Gamble is responsible for slaying Magnus Ironarm. A group of Isa Winterborn's warriors have broken away from the rest of her warband. Instead of fleeing back to the relative safety of Liathavan with their ill-gotten gains, they have pressed on. They have been seen marching east, past Tasato. Eventually it becomes clear that they are aiming for the Aretan Gamble. It is near certain that they are planning to raid the Gamble, seeking to take as much white granite and thralls as they can before they're forced to retreat. The group is led by one of Aza's champions, Magnus Ironarm, recognised by many of the Jotun as being favoured by Cathan Kane. Why Magnus and his followers have split from the rest of Isa's warband is unknown. He might have broken with Isa and be acting against her wishes, or he may simply be the boldest and bravest of her champions, the one to whom she entrusts this incredibly risky venture. His retinue is made up of a combined force of Ralyost, Ulvenoir and Skaldir. Given that this represents a direct threat to the Aretan Gamble, it is the responsibility of the custodian of the Aretan Gamble, Silvio de Tasato, to slay Magnus Ironarm and the rest of his retinue. If Magnus and the rest of his retinue are not driven back, they will seize part of the white granite and likely a number of thralls from the Gamble and withdraw back to the safety of Jotun lines. Listen to the wind, conjunction. A force of Jotun are still in the territory and moving towards Tradahoz. The Sentinel Gate will open at 9 p.m. on Friday to Fondra's Rest, Torres Madruga. The Maricosa Sendito is responsible for stopping the Jotun. The force of Jotun who journeyed across the Spider's Dream Bridge to attack into Savos are still active in Madruga. Scattered reports from across the settlements of Torres report them as moving towards the town of Tradahoz, the home of the Maricosan exiles. The inhabitants are simply not strong enough to protect themselves from this threat. If the Jotun are not stopped, then they will take much wealth and many artisans from the people there. If at least half of the force are not killed, the ministry available to the Maricosa Sendito will see its prices increased by at least 2/5. The force of Jotun is made up of a combined force of Relyost, Ulvenoir and Skaldir. Given that this represents a direct threat to Tradahoz, it is the responsibility of the Maricosa Sendito, Karg y Estrico y Urgio, to stop the Jotun. Although the responsibility for the conjunction belongs to the Sendito, it is likely that the Spider's Tollkeep, Margarita Serafani de Savos, will wish to be involved as well. Choices. Conjunction. Jarl Harkon is working in Southmoor to create a network of supplies for future Jotun invasions. The Sentinel Gate will open at 9:30 p.m. on Friday to Maggie's Croft, Southmoor, Mornwald. The Bailiff of the Downs is responsible for stopping the Jarl and the rest of the warband. Some years ago, Jarl Harkon was a force to be reckoned with in the Mornwald. A young but powerful Jotun leader, he ruled much of the lands in Southmoor. He was notorious for his hatred of the Feni. He led his warband into Alderley Forest on 3 separate occasions, seeking to find and crush the heart of Feni power, but was never successful. He was a wise and just ruler, by his own people's standards at least, someone who ruled without favour or prejudice, and he was considered to have a promising future. He was forced to flee when the Mornwald fell, leaving his estates and his thralls behind, a failure that has gnawed at him ever since. Now the Jarl and a small warband have returned in secrecy. Harkon and his Jotun are deep in Southmoor, working to establish stores of food, caches of weapons, and makeshift palisades, ready for when the armies of the Jotun once again invade the Morn. A number of scattered settlements of Mornwald thralls have sent word of the warband, and have sent word to Sarkham to be asked for the aid of the Bailiff of the Downs. They believe that if Jarl Harkon is not stopped, then the region of Southmoor will be considered under threat by the Jotun. Jarl Harkon's band is made up of a combined force of Ralyost, Ulvenoir and Skaldir. Given that this is a direct request to the Bailiff of the Downs, and that if Harkon's plan is completed it would result in a direct threat to the thralls of the Morn, it is the responsibility of the Bailiff of the Downs, Hob Kullach, to stop Jarl Harkon and the rest of the warband. Dust on the Wind. Conjunction. The warband of Gertaran has passed one of their prizes to the inhabitants of Beatrice's Field. The Sentinel Gate will open at 4 p.m. on Saturday to Beatrice's Field, Bastador, Rhinos. The general of the Red Wind Corsairs is responsible for retrieving the overflowing platter. One of the places looted by the Orcs of the Caraman Peaks was a small congregation overseen by the reclusive Adriana y Elia Guerra, a priest dedicated to prosperity who mostly retired from Anvil shortly after he was ousted as Cardinal of Prosperity in 353 YE. Adriana refused to allow the Orcs to take the many relics that he had collected over the years, and so was killed by the raiders. One of his few surviving nibblings, Antony, discovered the corpse of their uncle and the ransacked church. While most of the relics were simply trinkets that Adriana had collected over the years of visiting Anvil, one piece in particular stood out, an overflowing platter believed to have belonged to, or at least used by, Zemris herself. Antony has asked for the aid of the Red Wind Corsairs in recovering this relic. They don't want an heirloom of the Blade of the Isles to be abandoned to the Orcs of Rhinos, to be mishandled and lost to trade. The young Soutenir asks for help from the general in recovering the relic, and suggests that they might be able to acquire for themselves a chance to turn a profit from the Orcs of Rhinos. The Jotun inhabitants of Beatrice's Field is made up of a combined force of Relyost, Ulvenwar and Skaldir. Given that this is a direct request to the Red Wind Corsairs, it is the responsibility of the general, Delora y Sol Devorador y Urgio, to recover the overflowing platter and pass it on to one of the dust, glass or flame.